Shana Tova. Again. There's always something, I think, special about Rosh Hashanah coming in the fall as we begin our year and as we come back together following the months of summer, which I think we can say for all of us, the summer is a good time to catch up on many of the important things. They're a great opportunity to spend time with family, to do some reading, and to travel, maybe even get away a little bit. And for me, they are also a time to check in on the latest in online trends and online memes. I think it's safe to say that this was the summer of Barbenheimer. Now, in case you missed it, the two biggest movies of the summer, Barbie and Oppenheimer, as if they don't obviously have so much to do with each other, they were both released on the same weekend, leading to this portmanteau, as well as a lot of fun plans to see both of those movies back to back. But as fun as Barbenheimer was, though, we can set that aside, because that was not my favorite meme of the summer. Now, the one that really caught my eye and always made me chuckle whenever I saw it was a meme about male loneliness. Based on a July opinion piece in the New York Times, which was titled, "Is the Cure to Male Loneliness Out on the Pickleball Court?" It's true, published in July. So as you can imagine, many people online took that same headline and played with it, as well as the perhaps overly emotional graphic that went along with it in print. So popular alternate versions, and these are all real by the way, a classic was, "Is the cure to male loneliness retaking Constantinople? Is the cure to male loneliness a third computer monitor?" Or in another classic, "Is the cure to male loneliness picking imaginary football teams and stressing about them for 4 months?" Now, while all of these images, and again, you can look them all up online, they're all there, while all of them are, I think, fun for a good laugh, the original article is actually about something very important: pickleball. Okay, as serious as many here take their pickleball, I think we can agree that the more important issue is loneliness. While this particular op-ed addressed loneliness in men, that is just one symptom of a greater problem. Loneliness impacts men and women, young, old, and everything in between. So much so that a few months ago, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy wrote about what he called the loneliness epidemic in our country. He wrote, "At any moment, about 1 out of every 2 Americans is experiencing measurable levels of loneliness. This includes introverts and extroverts, rich and poor, and younger and older Americans. Sometimes loneliness is set off by the loss of a loved one or a job, a move to a new city, or health or financial difficulties, or a once-in-a-century pandemic." He continues, "Other times it's hard to know how it arose, but it's simply there. One thing is clear: nearly everyone experiences loneliness at some point. But its invisibility is part of what makes it so insidious. We need to acknowledge the loneliness and isolation that millions are experiencing, and the grave consequences for our mental health, physical health, and collective well-being." As Dr. Murthy wrote, nearly everyone experiences it at some point, nearly everyone. Recent studies have found teenagers struggling at higher levels than ever before. The CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Study found that 57% of teenage girls experience persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, an increase of over 40% from just 10 years ago. Teenage boys are struggling too, although not quite at the same level. COVID certainly had an impact here, but these trends began heading in the wrong direction even earlier, with many tracing it back to the spread of ubiquitous social media and cell phone use in the early 2010s. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. Many of us enjoy being alone, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whether with a good book or walk around the neighborhood, there's lots to appreciate about finding some time to ourselves. Much of our spirituality and religious reflections can take place alone. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov offered a prayer each morning saying exactly this: Master of the universe, grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and grass, among all growing things. And there may I be alone and enter into prayer to talk with the one to whom I belong. Likewise, many of us enjoy being out and about with many people around us, and so may struggle to fill our minds and our thoughts during those quieter moments. But that too is not loneliness. According to Psychology Today, loneliness is a state of distress or discomfort that results when one perceives a gap between one's desires for social connection and actual experiences of it. To put it another way, loneliness is the space between how we see ourselves and having people in our lives who see that too. It manifests in so many ways. It's the person whose partner passed away and whose family lives a great distance. It's the teenager who sees their friends posting countless fun pictures online but is not invited to join. It's the young adult who moved to a new city and is struggling to find their own community. It's the person who is separating from their spouse after years together and is struggling to move forward. It's also the person who seems happily married with children but doesn't have any real friends, people with whom they can truly be themselves outside of their immediate family. And it's the person who recently lost a parent or another close family member for the first time and doesn't know who to look up to anymore. All of these people share a similar experience, a sense of emptiness, that something is truly missing. Intuitively, we know that all of these struggles are problematic. Our tradition realizes this too, emphasizing the importance of community and being together in several ways. Among many other celebrations, today, Rosh Hashanah, is the anniversary of creation. Hayom Harat Olam. Today is the birthday of the world. Today the world was created. On each day of creation, the Torah describes God looking around and saying, Ki Tov, this is good. The light, Ki Tov. The land and the seas, Ki Tov. The sun, the moon, and the stars, Ki Tov. Even through the final day, creating the animals of land and all of humanity, V'hine Tov Me'od. This is very good. But then something surprising happens. God thinks a little further. After placing the first humans in the Garden of Eden and giving instructions to take care of it, God noticed something. Lo tov heyot adam levado. It is not good for a person to be alone. E'eseh lo ezer kenegdo. I will make a partner so that they might be together. From these first moments of creation, we are told not to let others be on their own. The first time God realizes something is lo tov, is not good, was when a person was alone. We are here to bring people together, to make sure that we all have someone to turn to. We saw this emphasized in our Torah reading this morning too. As I mentioned, Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, is one of our most powerful passages in the Torah, when Abraham was willing to put his own son's life at stake to prove his devotion to God. However we interpret this passage, it's clear that this forever impacted Abraham as well as Isaac and their relationship. When the two of them set out on their journey, one when Abraham knew what was going to happen, but Isaac didn't, they set out together. As the Torah describes it, Vayelechu shnehem yachdav, and the two of them walked on together. And afterwards, after Isaac came within a moment of losing his life, Vayashov Avraham el Na'arav Vayakumu Vayelechu. Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed. What about Isaac? He's not mentioned here. Perhaps scarred by what took place, he set out on his own, never appearing together with Abraham in the biblical text again. Isaac, a boy in his youth, whom the Torah calls Abraham's favorite son, never speaks to his father again after this moment. It's not difficult to picture him experiencing loneliness after that traumatic event. And Abraham too, even though he returned with his servants and had others around him, he no doubt felt that loneliness as well. We don't have to be alone to be lonely. Perhaps this is why we read Akedat Yitzchak on Rosh Hashanah, emphasizing the dangers of loneliness and being driven apart, reminding us to find ways of staying together and finding community. So much of our tradition is based on community. We require a minyan, a representation of community to offer our daily prayers and to gather for celebrations. Likewise, in times of loss and sorrow, we need community by our side to offer our prayers of mourning. We seek out places to live with Jewish communities so that we can all be together and so that no one needs to be alone. Why do we call this place a synagogue? What does that word mean? It's from the Greek, meaning a place of assembly. In Hebrew too, at times this is a Beit Tfilah, a house of prayer. At times it is a Beit Midrash, a house of study. But it is always a Beit Knesset, a house of assembly. This is a place where people come together. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks once wrote, "Much of Judaism is about the shape and structure of our togetherness. It values the individual, but does not endorse individualism. Ours is a religion of community. Our holiest prayers can only be said in the presence of a minyan, the minimum definition of a community. When we pray, we do so as a community. Martin Buber spoke of I and thou, but Judaism is a matter of we and thou. Our synagogues, our communities, our statements against loneliness, they are a way of banding together to make sure we are not left alone. It's no coincidence that while affiliation with synagogues and other religious institutions has declined across the country in recent years, the prevalence of loneliness has risen. Jill Filipovic recently wrote in The Atlantic, "We need to repair broken community ties so fewer among us feel like they're struggling alone. And we need to encourage the cultivation of a sense of purpose beyond the self. We also know what stands in the way of resilience, avoiding difficult ideas and imperfect people, catastrophizing, isolating ourselves inside our own heads. Synagogues, houses of worship, and religious communities often provide all of these: community ties, a sense of purpose, encountering challenging ideas and imperfect people. All of that is what makes a synagogue community special. In some ways, fighting the loneliness epidemic is harder than fighting the COVID pandemic. There's no vaccine or booster to increase your protection. It's not something a person can just solve on their own. There's a story in the Talmud about a famous rabbi who was known for his healing skills. But that Rabbi Yochanan needed his friend, Rabbi Hanina, to come and heal him. Why couldn't Rabbi Yochanan heal himself? The Talmud answers, Ein chavush matir atzmo mi beit ha'asurim. A prisoner cannot free himself from prison, but needs others to release him. A person cannot just decide they don't want to be lonely anymore. Sure, that's a step in the process, but ultimately, they need someone else to turn to, someone to reach out to them. A person can't free themselves from this epidemic, but needs others to help. Part of the Surgeon General's strategy for addressing loneliness is building up the infrastructure that enables social connections, community organizations, and gathering places. So just by being here, we're already doing better than so many others. Being part of a synagogue that brings people together is among the best ways to help push back against this epidemic. But there's more. There are things that each of us can do. I love texting and group chats as much as anyone, but I think we all know it's not quite the same as really talking with someone. Is there someone we haven't seen in a while? Reach out and say hello. Are there people we know a little bit but want to build more of a connection, can make the call. Do we know the people sitting next to us right now? Are there people here who seem like they may not know anyone? A smiling face and a friendly introduction can go a long way. This is something all of us can strive to be better at, and I include myself in that too. I know there are always more people to speak it to and check in with, and so that is one of my major goals for this year ahead. It's something that we all must work towards as a kehillah. Loneliness may never fully go away, but there are ways to lessen the burden. Even if we're surrounded by people, even if we receive all the phone calls and check-ins, there can still be those hard moments. But in those moments, we need to remember that others have been there before. Rabbi Chaim of Sanz, a Hasidic Rebbe known as a Divrei Chaim, told his followers this story. Once a man lost his way in a great forest. He searched for a way out, but each path he took only led him deeper into the woods. Eventually, he heard the sound of someone approaching. His heart lifted. He waited until the other approached and asked him to show him the way out. "I do not know," said the other, "for I too am lost. But this I can tell you, do not take the way I have been, for that will lead you astray. And now let us search for a new way together." The rabbi lifted his eyes up, and his followers understood. They understood that this was a place where others had been lost before, struggling in what seems like a deep forest with no clear way out. But oftentimes, all it takes to find that pathway back home, back into the light, is another person to look for it with you. The loneliness epidemic, as the Surgeon General called it, is real, and it's serious. But it's also something we can address. As part of creation, we're told that each one of us is created in God's image, as an individual with infinite worth and a divine spark. Even if it may feel that others don't always see that in us, we know it's there. A midrash teaches that each of us has a choir of angels leading us wherever we go, proclaiming, "Make way for the image of God." Our challenge is to make sure we all know that about ourselves and that we see it in every person around us too. I pray that in this new year, we'll each find ways to help alleviate this epidemic of loneliness. Whether the cure is on the pickleball court, whether it's in the synagogue, or anywhere else. The cure, the help, it's right there waiting for us to open our hearts and to be found. Shana Tova.